Kia ora koutou e hoa ma. I am Stephanie. This is Boots Theory. We are doing the thing, making a video. I'm not stressed. This hasn't taken me 12 takes just to say my own name correctly. Let's start with a confession. As a teenage Babylon 5 fan, I was a Deep Space Nine hater. What were they thinking? It's called Star Trek. You've got to go on a trek. You can't base your series on an object in stationary orbit around one planet. Then Voyager happened a few years after that, and it was a bit of a cursed monkey's paw for all of us.
And I hadn't even watched all of Deep Space Nine. I'd enjoyed the first few seasons, but it was the Dark Ages, kids, and I mean that in the historically accurate sense. It was really hard to access media down here in Aotearoa. We had 3 television channels, and you watched what they wanted you to watch when they showed it, and it usually wasn't science fiction. Being able to catch all 5 seasons of Babylon 5 was some kind of miracle. Then I met a wonderful man who was a massive Deep Space Nine fan, and I heard his reassurances about the later seasons being amazing, and pushed through my skepticism, and what do you know, it's pretty good. Definitely my favourite Trek, after the perfect trilogy of movies that is Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and The Voyage Home. I love Strange New Worlds, but I really felt it needed a longer episode run, and it dropped the ball a couple of times. Lower Decks is hilarious, but it's animated, so it occupies a different quadrant of my brain. Anyway, for many years the Babylon 5 and DS9 DVD boxed sets lived in harmony, until I got this itch in my brain.
There's a lot of amazing Star Trek criticism out there. Big shout out from a fangirl to Steve Shives and Jesse Gender. I love you. But Babylon 5, my one true love, the reason I shout, "This is wrong tool," every time I pick up a dessert spoon, the series that taught me so many important life lessons, just doesn't get the same level of love that it deserves. Or the reboot it deserves. And sometimes it's fun to fight about things we love. So let's get to it.
Disclaimer time! Look, I've been on the internet for a long time, so I know what some of you are like. Before you jump down to the comments and give the algorithm an abusive little boost, please bear in mind.
These are my opinions. These are my opinions. And these are my opinions.
Comparing and critiquing television shows is not science. If you want to jump on your high horse and declare my categories and decisions to be objectively bad, I can't stop you. But if you want it to last more than 3 minutes before I nuke it from orbit, do it somewhere else. I haven't rewatched either series in preparation for this video because I have a toddler and a full-time day job, and I did not care that much because these are my opinions. Of course, I haven't covered everything. You don't even know how long this script is. Thankfully, as a New Zealander, I speak very quickly. Finally, this is all in good fun, folks. Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine are 2 of the finest shows ever made, top of the class for their era of sci-fi, and I will rewatch both of them probably for the rest of my life, as long as capitalism stops getting in the way of my nostalgia. I hope you do the same.
Honestly, I would love to hear what you think. Which is your favourite episode? Who is your favourite criminally underrated character? Why are they all played by Jeffrey Combs? Which line of dialogue would you include in your wedding or civil union vows? And how many of you actually know someone called Jadzia? I bet that's aged a lot better than all the 2010s babies called Khaleesi.
Now let's get to the numbers. Babylon 5 screened in the United States for 5 seasons and 6 television movies between 1993 and 1998, and revolutionized CG in television. Deep Space Nine ran for 7 seasons from 1993 to 1999, and made Avery Brooks everyone's favourite TV dad. From the start, the biggest obvious difference was the setting. Each series has pros and cons. Deep Space Nine was built on a foundation decades old, comprising Star Trek's original series movies, animated series, novels and comics, and Star Trek The Next Generation's 5 or 6 seasons at that point. It does a lot of new stuff with the premise, which is why a lot of Trek fans rate it as our favourite. There are long-running plot threads, much more consistently developed characters, and a war that feels like a war.
There are war crimes happening on Deep Space Nine, and sometimes our heroes are the ones committing them, and for some reason that's good?
DS9 explores conflict and upheaval and devastation, but it feels a bit out of place. The uniforms, the weapons, the ships, particularly those of the Federation, are not selling serious military aesthetics. Because they're not. That's not the vibe. The Ferengi get a major and fantastic overhaul from their terrible TNG origins, but Klingons are still going to Klingon, Romulans are still going to Romulan, Starfleet admirals are still going to be absolutely terrible. Babylon 5, on the other hand, gets a clean slate. You've never seen these aliens before, so besides the semiotics...
Yes, I just wanted an excuse to say semiotics.
That is to say, the Minbari are weird space elves, Centauri are so Eurocentric imperialism it hurts. You don't know what to expect, and even when you do get an impression of someone, it can be subverted. Like the Narn appearing at first to be opportunistic weapons dealers, with the steady revelation of the impacts of occupation, exploitation, and genocide they've experienced, putting things into a really different perspective by the time Jakar becomes the great philosopher-diplomat of the Interstellar Alliance in Season 5.
Both of these shows really do make me talk about war crimes a lot.
What makes both work is the calibre of the writing, acting, and showrunning teams they had. Plenty of brand new sci-fi settings fail because the world building isn't there, and plenty of shows set in established universes fail because they can't do anything new or interesting.
And is the show that can't do anything new or interesting in the room with us right now?
So I'm calling this one down the middle. The Metaplot. Spoiler alert, this one is going the same way. Both of these shows really broke the mold in terms of having long-running, multi-season stories with genuine weight and consequences, not just for the characters involved, but their whole worlds. Both benefited from having showrunners, in an era where showrunner wasn't even a word we used, who had strong ideas and vision and some autonomy to deliver it. Both J. Michael Straczynski and Ira Stephen Bear were constrained in different ways by studio and management interference, and who knows what they might have achieved if we'd just called them auteurs and let them put everything in high-definition slow-mo.
Yes, I am baiting the Snyder fans.
And both shows pull it off. There's some jankiness, a few things don't quite line up as they were probably meant to, but you can watch either series start to finish and feel like you experienced a complete story. The cast.
Let's get to some proper competition.
I've read a few articles which are pretty dismissive of the idea that there's a lot of similarities between Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine, beyond a few superficial character beats and both being stuck on a station, but you can go pretty deep down that rabbit hole if you want to. Platonic baseball-loving dad energy? Check. Talented young doctors who have their ideals threatened by personal crisis? Check. Feisty redheads called Lita? Check. Iconic chiefs of security who can come across as comic relief but ultimately have to wrangle with the mistakes of their past and confront their deepest personal truths, potentially endangering the rest of the cast in the process?
Check.
Stroppy women first officers with combat experience who are either Jewish or potentially Jewish coded.
Bajorans are also specifically Palestinian coded, do not start in the comments.
With brief flashes of on-screen bisexuality who lost their mothers in traumatic circumstances and have to reveal a dark secret to a man whose trust they fear losing? Check. But there are some critical differences. Both shows have iconic alien characters who aren't aligned to the military organisation running the station, but they go in really different directions. Babylon 5 has its fabulous trio of ambassadors, Delenn, Jakar and Londo, and their amazing aides, Lanier, Na'Toth and Vir. DS9 has a much stronger Western vibe, so it has its local townsfolk with hidden depths, the criminal family who run the bar, and the turncoat tailor. Plain, simple, Garrick. More stellar actors doing amazing work and building impressively complex character arcs from just a few appearances.
But I'm sorry, it's not even close for me. It would be Babylon 5 based on any one of the three ambassadors' storylines.
Delenn is essentially the person responsible for the entire plot of the show happening, and ends up genetically hybridizing herself, having a beautiful love story and resetting the entire power structure of her species. Jakar is arrogant, duplicitous, martyred, exiled, sacrificed, redeemed, and sets his people on a course to healing from their second genocide in his lifetime. Londo is a fop, a clown, a lover, a jaded warrior, a schemer, a war criminal, an emperor, and a prophet.
And they have assistants, also played by ridiculously talented actors who get their own story arcs, overlapping and supporting, but also challenging their boss's ideas and actions? Fuck.
Antagonists. When it comes to bad guys, Babylon 5s tend to be institutional rather than personal. The Clark administration, Nightwatch, the Psi Corps, the Shadows. This is not to say the show lacks good bad guys. Star Trek alumni Walter Koenig's turn as Psy-Cop Alfred Bester could almost nail the game, and I still get a little jump in my heart rate when I read guest starring Ed Wasser as Morden in the opening credits of an episode. DS9 has institutional opponents, the Cardassians, the Dominion, the Starfleet Admiralty, but they have names, faces, and backstories. There's the disturbingly attractive, in an entirely made of red flags lizard-necked way, Gul Dukat, the unspeakably irritating and yet total girl boss Kai Wynn. The female changeling doesn't even have a name, but you can hear her voice in your head right now saying, "That was Weyoun's last clone." And speaking of which, Weyoun. DS9 ran longer. It had less legwork to do because of the established Star Trek setting, and it takes a much more personal focus on its antagonists. Sure, there are Babylon 5 novels that go into things like Bester's backstory or what happened to the original Morden and Anna on Zahadum, but it's not in the text of the show. We do get to find out that Bester had a love interest who was exploited by the Shadows, but we don't know why he's such a cop. We don't know who Morden was, or how much he's truly been corrupted, and Cartagia is fucking fabulous and creepy, but beyond wealthy royals are wacky yo, he doesn't have a lot of context. President Clark barely appears on screen, and his political proxies are all one-episode wonders. But Kai Wynn? Yes, she's a religious fundamentalist, but she's not a caricature. She does have faith. And she's a cynical operator who exploits the faith of others to gain political power. And she has her limits, immediately renouncing First Minister Jaro when she finds out he's been working with Cardassians. She seems to take that quite personally. She knows she has weaknesses, like being a terrible negotiator, and she will act ruthlessly to stop anyone else discovering them.
That being said, was it really so bad to let Bareil die?
And Dukat is one of my favourite bad guys of all time because he's so unrelentingly self-justifying. The man ran labour camps and executed families and assaulted women, and he genuinely believes because he has spent years telling himself he's a good person who had no choice, who actually made things better. He can rationalise almost everything he's done, and until quite late in the series, a lot of people bought it. That's so much more interesting than a bad guy who's just bad and vicious and evil because he's bad and vicious and evil. And then they give him the crisis moment of admitting everything he spent years denying about himself, and then he gets more character arc after that. Romantic interests.
So going into the fourth round, we are at a tie with each show holding its own in terms of character development. So let's look at an area where they both suck. Male love interests.
I don't know what it is about science fiction of the 90s, but it loved saddling strong female characters with the most mid, beige, uninspiring dudes as either current or previous lovers. Kira Nerys was saddled with a series of very, very boring Bajoran men, all of whom should have been more interesting just on the basis of their character bios. In Babylon 5, both Susan Ivanova and Talia Winters have incredibly 90s-looking dudes show up to sow chaos and make you question their taste.
Then it turns out that their taste is actually for each other. But don't get excited, kids, it was the 90s. We find out that they were lovers, implied, about 5 minutes before Talia is revealed to be a double agent and promptly vanishes from the show. Susan mentions it like maybe once after that. And if you were looking for bisexual tension, it is not here.
Deep Space Nine, you tried, but no. Ancient aliens. Both series feature ancient aliens.
Sorry.
Who are revealed to have meddled in human affairs, or at least one human's affairs. They speak cryptically. They can't really be perceived by our normal senses. They're worshipped as gods in slightly different ways. The major difference is that the wormhole aliens are, more or less, stuck in the wormhole. They communicate in dreamy vision sequences, often played by other members of the cast, usually leading people towards personal revelation rather than taking an active part in proceedings. Babylon 5's Vorlons, on the other hand, are individuals, possibly, who interact with our main cast, kind of. Most commonly through their ambassador aboard the station, Kosh, who says all kinds of weird stuff that makes no sense and some stuff that makes a lot of sense but is really frightening. They offer some personal revelation to key characters like Sheridan, but also they show up with their ships and assassinate the person who's discovered the key to everlasting life because, quote, "you are not ready for immortality."
Like I said, frightening.
What's extra fun is that the Vorlons are not alone. Rather than creating a setting where there's a single outside-the-norm species who are different to everyone else, In Babylon 5, you come to learn that the Vorlons are a younger, ancient race. Their direct meddling is basically a sign that they're still in their juvenile activist phase, thinking they can bend the galaxy to their will by shouting at it.
Yes, I am aware I sound like a jaded elder millennial right now, because that's what I am.
The Vorlons take this one, and I didn't even start on the shadows. Star Wars. Can I say that?
What is a sci-fi show without shooty bang-bangs in space?
I'm not even gonna pretend, y'all. I love The Defiant, but Babylon 5's space battles actually take place in 3 dimensions. The tactics work. The 1,000,000-to-1 maneuvers make sense. The disparities in speed, armor, armaments, logistics all play out. The time Sheridan opens a jump gate inside a jump gate to destroy a shadow vessel and makes a moral case because it's the gate nearest the Markab homeworld, they all died from a pandemic in an earlier season, and I'm just not revisiting that right now. And he hates grave robbers? I mean, that was the Holdo maneuver before the Holdo maneuver, and no, I will not do a video on The Last Jedi. Yet. The best episode.
So, first question. What makes each of these the best episode of the series? And the answer is, say it with me, my opinion, it's my video. I am going to go into more detail because each of these is a masterpiece and a reason in of itself for you to watch the series it belongs to. But I'm also not going to leave you hanging. The winner is... It's a pretty tight call. No Surrender, No Retreat is hot. But Far Beyond the Stars is hot, hot, hot!
They're also very different episodes. No Surrender, No Retreat happens in the thick of the Earth Alliance civil war. The bulk of the action is a flawlessly executed space battle as Sheridan's forces attempt to break the Earth Force blockade around the colony of Proxima 3, which has declared independence. What elevates it is there's also interpersonal conflict and serious moral dilemmas being hashed out between the various commanders of the ships involved. It's a civil war. These officers, who are now on opposite sides of the conflict, know each other. They've each had to wrestle or refused to wrestle with the question of what you do when served with an illegal order. Both sides face mutinies or attempted mutinies among their crew. And meanwhile, back on the station, 2 implacable enemies carefully negotiate an agreement which might help bring the war to a close all the sooner. And I haven't even mentioned that Dr. Kelso from Scrubs is the big bad of this episode. On the other hand, Far Beyond the Stars is a dream sequence episode, which would normally be a bad thing. Instead, it's phenomenal. Sisko awakes to find himself no longer the commander of a strategically critical space station in the 24th century, but a black science fiction writer in 1950s New York City. His friends and colleagues are played by the rest of the core and recurring cast, many of the actors finally get to show their whole faces for once, and racism and misogyny is, well, everywhere. It's a beautiful and heart-wrenching episode, which also affords the entire cast of the show an opportunity to flex their acting muscles, and because they're all fantastic actors, it's a joy to watch. It also interrogates the history of science fiction and Star Trek's own place in it. It's a stark reminder of how much closer we, the viewers, are to that era than the one we've been spending the rest of the series in. It demands that we be better people than the ones who came before us, and pay attention and notice and care about the real-life norms and power structures that impact our entertainment.
It is very political. Did you know that sometimes Star Trek is political?
It's also an episode which could be taken right out of Star Trek. This story doesn't have to occur during the events of Deep Space Nine. It could be an amazing one-off short story. But confronting you with these ideas 6 seasons and 13 episodes deep into your acquaintance with Benjamin Sisko, 6 seasons and 13 episodes into seeing what this cast can do when they're given great material, and giving them incredible material, is what takes the trophy here. Worst episode. Babylon 5 is feeling robbed over the best episode category, so it has chosen its champion for this category wisely. Season 1's TKO. Been a long while since I heard that name.
Now, I did do a wee check on the internet discourse, always a mistake, and it seems that a lot of you think the worst episode of Season 1 of Babylon 5 is Infection. And I don't know how to tell you how wrong you are. Maybe it's just me, but I'm living in the version of 2024 where we are in a constant state of battle against sad little creeps with too much social power who really love drawing clear black and white lines around biological purity and would happily send our whole species extinct if they could say it protected women's spaces. So I think it's quite a good episode with a lot of ongoing relevance, but you do you. We are not here to talk about infection.
TKO commits a very common Babylon 5 sin of having someone show up who's the friend of a core cast member who has never been mentioned before and will never be mentioned again, in order for this story to play out without having any long-lasting ramifications. He's a fighter, and he wants to fight in the big, scary alien mixed martial arts tournament. But it's hardcore, see? Like what the pre-9/11 network television world thought hardcore looked like.
Oh no, punching!
To make things even worse, the tournament is excessively generic Asian coded. It's called the Muay Thai.
It's legally distinct, I guess?
And the organiser of the fights is played by an actor with a broad Korean accent. And that shouldn't be a problem, and this isn't his fault, but it's like the Trade Federation in Phantom Menace. The resulting vibes are very racist.
And of course, no human can fight in the Muay Thai. We're just so soft and squishy and not hardcore enough. But this guy is determined that he's going to fight in the Muay Thai, so we get a cool training montage, and then he fights in the Muay Thai, and he wins in his first fight, and now humans are allowed to fight in the Muay Thai. That's social progress. The B plot is Ivanova coming to terms with the death of her father, which actually, as the series progresses, is a much more important plotline and really builds towards her character development. But this episode is so bad that feels like a distraction from the cool punching. Okay, so I've gone on about TKO for a bit. I don't like TKO. But you're thinking to yourself, that was quite long. Am I about to get an equally long diatribe about a terrible episode of Deep Space Nine? Is Stephanie gonna weigh up the cons and cons of each episode and have a reasoned, nuanced analysis of what makes one worse than the other? No. Deep Space Nine's worst episode is Profit and Lace. Enough said. Okay team, we've been discussing the big broad categories that really any science fiction show could fit into and represent well in. Let's get down to some more specialised contests.
Welcome to the Quickfire round. Most annoying unnecessary main cast death, Jadzia versus Marcus. Marcus's death should feel cleaner, because at least the alien healing device which kills him was already referenced in previous episodes, and he chose it to save Ivanova. But I simply cannot forgive the hackneyed dialogue where Lanier, of all people, accidentally lets slip that there's an alien healing device which kills people back on the station. It's like if Chekhov's gun was a howitzer and it fired immediately. Worst hospital pass to an actress replacing a beloved departed character in the show's last season? Tracy Scoggins versus Nicole de Boer. This is a toughie. I genuinely think I would like Esri better if we'd got a few more seasons and a bit more development around the inherent conflict for her containing all of Jadzia's memories while working with Jadzia's loved ones. Likewise, Lockley coming in as the Earth Force loyalist post-Civil War to restore order could have been a great source of tension, except they made her Sheridan's ex, because who hasn't he been married to? And then slapped her in lingerie for a joke in one of the spin-off movies.
Bad move, Joe.
On the other hand, the fact Esri ends up with Julian has just always filled me with squick. Because it's like, yay, he finally got the woman of his dreams, but in a different, smaller, less threatening body.
Romance.
Best episode about industrial action and unionized labor. Bar Association versus By Any Means Necessary. I am going to try not to go on and on about this because it's the quickfire round, but the fact that both shows have episodes fully focused on the importance of union organisation and the power of labour to defend workers' rights is such a delight. Of course I love Rom as a floor steward. Of course I love he wasn't a hero, he was a union man. But Babylon 5 literally has a union-busting scumbag get owned when he assumes that Sinclair will use violence to end the strikes, and instead Sinclair diverts military funding into pay increases and safer work rosters, because that's praxis. Best episode written by DC Fontana about the fallout from a celebrated war hero's death, which forces a reconsideration of their legend and the pedestal we put people on. Dax vs. Legacies. Props to one of the finest TV science fiction writers of all time, she's left me with a proper dilemma. Dax puts Jadzia on trial for a 30-year-old murder, raising the question of her culpability for the crimes of a previous host. It's classic Star Trek courtroom scenes with Odo getting to do some detective work and Kira delivering one of her finest lines. In Legacies, Delenn takes a huge risk to honour the wishes of a dead Minbari general who never wanted his passing to become a glorification of war, clashing with one of Babylon 5's great recurring characters, Naroon, and challenging our, and the human characters', perception of her as an aloof, orthodox operator. It also provides a massive amount of world building, considering the legacy of the Earth-Minbari War and foreshadowing the huge revelations that are to come around Commander Sinclair's heritage.
Well, this one's a tie. Not helpful, Dorothy.
Boots Theory Airlines thanks you for your patience. We will now be turning to the Quickfire round. Best use of. Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine were filmed in California at the exact same time, so naturally they have a lot of overlapping guest stars. My thanks to Memory Alpha for assembling a tidy table of them, and apologies for butchering everyone's name. Here are 6 of my favourites, and which show I think used them best. Thomas Capacci, Eric Avari, Ron Canada, Michael and Sarah, Mary Kay Adams, Majel Barrett. And now, the conclusion.
Alright friends, the time has come. Who is our winner? Who is the god king or queen of 90s sci-fi television? What is the true show of my heart? It's Babylon 5. It was always going to be Babylon 5. You cannot be surprised by this. But now I have data to prove it, and data are objective.
There is so much more I could and want to talk about, like Babylon 5's take on Jack the Ripper, or DS9's practically unique depiction of multiple good family dynamics. They both do an amazing job of exploring healing and reconciliation and the trauma people carry from war and oppression. A religious comparison could be an entire video on its own, and I'm annoyed that I didn't find space to rave about The Rock cried out no hiding place, or the time Cisco punched Q. It also didn't feel particularly fun to rank each series' analysis and exploration of atrocities and war crimes.
Again, with the war crimes.
But there would be a lot to say there. This script was nearly 5,000 words already. By the time I've added this bit, it'll be well over, so I really do apologise. These are 2 incredibly well-made shows which take on serious issues in a way that's respectful and thought-provoking, and are also in space. I hope you've enjoyed a bit of a trip down memory lane with me, and maybe I've even inspired you to do a rewatch. Or, if you've always been a purist for one series, give the other a long overdue try. Let me know how awesome I am down in the comments, and if you include the phrase self-sealing stem bolts, the Blessed Exchequer may offer you a 5% discount on your next offering.
Thank you so much for sticking around to the end, folks. It has been a blast. I would love it if you gave me some validation in the form of a like, or even subscribing to the channel if you want more of this, except not more of this, because the next video will be a completely different genre, because I hate the algorithm. It will nevertheless feature this pretty face and more of this apparently cute Kiwi accent. I don't know what international audiences are on, but it is something. Yeah, I'll probably also do one about why the channel is called Boots Theory. If you know the answer, leave your most incorrect guess in the comments below. And one way or another, I hope to see you in the next one. Mā te wā!